Hello, BookTube. Well, Deb came over today to look after little Fraulein, which freed me to do some errands, including lunch on Beacon Hill with an old friend of mine and meeting up with another old friend of mine in the financial district and walking around, and you'll never guess what happened. Although, if you watch this channel, you will guess what happened. In no time at all, I had accumulated gigantic amounts of books. Books I do not need. Books I do not need. I get books in the mail at this address every day. But it didn't matter. Now, virtually all of these were free. I want to show them to you. I don't know, just to marinate in my own misery. But although it's a sweet kind of misery, and you all know that. So that's why I'm sharing it, because you're all got the same sickness that I do. For part of the day, I was actually accompanied by a young teenager, my Sherpet, who's tall and skinny and has never been in a weight room in his life. And despite the fact that I first met him when he offered to carry books, well, he's no muscular teenager, let's put it that way. And this was a freakish amount of books. And also, his company was not permanent. So there came a horrifying moment when all of the books had to be transferred to me. and I did not have the common sense to call a cab the way an old person would. Instead, I just carried them back here, my own. Probably 100 pounds of books. And I want to show them to you because there's a lot of fun stuff here. I didn't have any idea what I was going to find or what was going to come my way. And so let's see. I don't even know how we'll want to start with this. This is not even all of them. I pulled some of them aside because I want to talk about them in a month. Well, we'll just go straight through here. So the first one is Viva, Gottlieb, Zorn, The Beginning of Desire, which is a book of exegesis on the Book of Genesis that is incredibly good, just amazingly dense with allusions to rabbinical literature and the Talmud, psychology, all the recent literary interpretations in the last 2,000 years. Just an amazing work. I remember reading it and really liking it when it first came out. That was, hang on, let me see here. 1995. But it grew on me the more I thought about it, and I also have no idea, of course, where my copy is, so I was glad to find it. Then this is a nice collection of Pico Ear, who's just an occasional writer, writes a lot about travel. And this is a collection of his occasional writings, which is all of his travel stuff, a lot of his reporting, and also all of his book writing up till the point of publication of this book, which was, that's great to have it all in one volume. He's a terrific writer. And I'm always he's still working, so it's always a great inducement when you see him in the table of contents of a literary magazine. So to have a book, that's great. And then it's a trade paperback, and it's not a particularly well-made trade paperback. And I have had the hardcover. In fact, I might have hauled the hardcover on this channel a year or two ago. I get it, and then I immediately send it away, and so I don't have a copy at the moment. There was a trade paperback, and it was free, and it was going to be thrown away, so I grabbed it as sort of a placeholder. And it's A Very Private Eye. Sort of an autobiographical collection by the great Barbara Pym. Letters, diaries, journal entries, sketches of autobiography. Just a delight. A delightful way to get into the world and mind and quips of terrific writer. And the hardcover of this is a really attractive thing, although the one superiority the trade paperback has is that the hardcover, the back consists of the whole thing is just an author photo of our author standing in her back garden holding a cat, an enormous cat. so this doesn't have that, but it's only a placeholder. I'm sure that at the Brattle Bookshop at the Goodwill, I will see a $1 copy of A Very Private Eye in hardcover, and then I will get it. And by then, I will almost certainly have sent this away to either one of you or to somebody else I know. The next one was it was a location buy, if that is a BookTube thing. This is The Venetian Betrayal by Steve Berry, who writes Dan Brown-style historical, political, literary thrillers. almost always involving the Knights Templar or something silly like that. And a large part of it takes place in Venice, and it's a UK trade paperback that I really love, UK trade paperbacks. And I don't think, read this. I think I read synopses of it when it first came out and just sort of gave it a miss. This came out in 2007. I don't recall ever having actually read it, so when I'm in a thriller frame of mind. And then what have we got here? Oh, okay, all right. Well, this isn't in the best shape, but I can rescue it. And I couldn't bear the thought of it being thrown away. This is The Last Hurrah by Edwin O'Connor, his great novel about an old American politician who decides to make one more run to be the lord of his city, which is not named, but which is clearly Boston. And he's a product of poetry quoting, backroom grafting, old ward-style politics, and that world is going away, and he knows it, and so does everyone else. So in addition to being the last hurrah of his career, he and the tone of the book is that it's the last hurrah of that kind of politicking in America. And which makes it sound very somber, but it's actually hilarious. It's a hilarious novel. And I don't need an extra copy. I have this very hardcover, only in better shape. And I have the new trade paperback that was reissued by the University of Chicago Press, and I have a little mass market paperback. So I just couldn't bear the thought of it being thrown away. That's all. I'm sure I'll find a recipient for one of those versions. The next one is another UK trade paperback. I love UK trade paperbacks. And this one is a book I think I just mentioned it on this channel just recently. This is Jamie O'Neill at Swim Two Boys. A big, beautiful, literarily firecrackery novel of young gay love of two boys who and not just their relationship with each other, but this whole extrapolated web of relationships all around them throughout years of their life. Just an incredible book. Just an amazing, immersive reading experience where the author not only has a great story to tell, but also has worked hard to figure out a linguistic way to tell it that is distinctive. And then the next one is just a lovely little hardcover. I don't need it, of course. I don't need any of these. It's absolutely ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. There's probably 2 books in this entire pile that actually fill a need on my shelves. All the rest of them are just... Anyway, this one, I admit, I had March Mystery Madness in mind. Those of you who might not know what I'm talking about. That's a YouTube event coming up in the month of March, all through the month of March, where a bunch of booktubers, including myself, are hosting an event called March Mystery Madness, celebrating murder mysteries in all their different varieties and all the ways that we love them. And it's the first booktube event anyone has ever actually asked me to help host. And it's got me all fired up for a murder mystery, which I love reading anyway. I found a hardcover copy of The Deer Leap by Martha Grimes in this lovely thing with that lovely artwork. I wonder if this actually tells me. There was a whole all of her novels were reprinted in the 80s with this cover art, this kind of somber, heavy on the blue register cover art. I wonder if no, okay, no, well, no, okay, yes, the painting is by Alexander Farquharson. That sounds British. And there's our author. Oh, good Lord. As a young woman, wow. You'll notice she has the good sense to pose with a dog, not a cat. But anyway, I automatically thought of that because I'm gonna be talking a lot about murder mysteries in March, and it's good to have some Martha Grimes in hardcover. Another one. This is one of the very few ones that actually does fill a space in my library. And that is this great old modern library of The Pursuit of Love and Love in a Cold Climate, both by the great Nancy Mitford of the Mitford sisters. And it's in these old, there was a run of time where modern libraries were in these beige paper covers, no design whatsoever. They all look very similar on a row together. And for some reason, I like the aesthetic. I always get these when I find them. And I have a shelf of them out in the other room. The other room has a filled-in, bricked-in fireplace that actually still retains its mantle. And I have used the mantle for of these old modern libraries, and but finding it like this is a perfect opportunity to reread it, to reread at least one of the two books. And then the next one is another UK trade paperback, and it's a big novel by Matthew Pearl, the author of the Dante game, who did the Dante Club. Sorry, I knew I got that wrong. The Dante game was Jane Langton. It was also great, but the Dante Club was his breakout hit, his huge hit, a murder mystery revolving around the first English language translation of Dante's Inferno in America, with a literary cast of characters. And this is a kind of a take on that. I never actually read it. And when I saw it today, I realized, oh my God, this is an author you really like. I've met him. He's a really nice guy. Does really solid work. And yet this book came out and I never read it. And I want to correct that. So this takes place in the immediate aftermath of the American Civil War in the late 1860s, when odd things start happening. Compasses start going wrong. Glass starts melting. All glass starts melting. All sorts of quasi-technological things start going wrong. And in Cambridge or in Boston, the MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, has just started. It has just been born. And the technologists involved, the technologists named in the title, are a quartet of fledgling scientists under the aegis of MIT who take it upon themselves to try and figure out what's going on and maybe save the world. And that plot sounds just fantastic. I don't know why I never got to it when it came out. Then another one, this is another mystery, another March Mystery Madness thing. Had to get it, because I don't think I have anything by this author. I'm pretty sure that at the behest of one of you, I packed up everything I had and sent it off. But this is Dorothy Sayers, and this is a hardcover collection of all of her short stories starring Lord Peter Wimsey, her toffish sleuth, and his toffish world. I saw a hardcover of all the collected stories. I had the old paperback. It was a very nice looking, elegant looking paperback of the collected Lord Peter. This very book, only I got rid of it. It's gone to one of you. And I know I'm going to want to talk about Dorothy Sayers at least a couple of times in March, so I grabbed this. You're going to want it anyway, right? You don't want to have a house with... As I was telling Deb when I got back, the only Dorothy Sayers that I have in the place right now is on that wall of penguins. It's her Dante. She did the Dante's Divine Comedy for Penguin Classics years and years and years ago, and I really like her version. I could I wouldn't live or die by her translation, but her notes are amazing. And then, speaking of Dante, this is another one that actually fills a need. This is another one of the things that I would certainly have got anyway, even if there were a price tag on it. And it's these. Look at this. This is the Divine Comedy of Dante. This is all 3 volumes in the quality paperback edition, translated by Alan Mandelbaum with English on one side and Italian on the other. And the reason that I wanted this is because it has all of the gorgeous illustrations that filled the overpriced collector's item hardcovers that it was the form that these originally saw the light of day. And then Quality Paperbacks did these, which are nice big trade paperbacks that are solidly put together. And then after that, Bantam did these in mass markets, and they reproduced the artwork. But the artwork, really, it looks worse the smaller it is. And B, those old Bantam trade or mass markets, they start to die the minute they're more than a year old. The glue starts to fail, paper starts to dry out, the cover becomes stiff and easy to just snap right off the front of the book. And so I don't have them anymore because they drove me nuts. I would read them and then they would fall apart. And the Everyman's Library also did a 1-volume collected Mandelbaum Dante that I had for a while, but I found myself not reading it because A, sorry to keep enumerating, but A, I don't ever want to read. I don't want to be lugging around the rest of the Commedia when I want to read only Purgatorio. I want them in individual volumes. And B, the collected edition didn't have any artwork. It's a whole nother paycheck they had to cut, so they didn't do it. So this is actually the form of Dante that I want in this room on my shelves. so this was a real find to find these. Then this next one is falls in line with what we've been seeing on this channel a lot, which is my love of all things U.S. presidents. I think probably a reaction to our current U.S. president and to all the subsequent U.S. presidents that will follow after him. I think that my embracing my love of reading about previous presidents is probably partly a backlash about the fact that America is only going to have freak show presidents from now on. Now that it's been proven, now that it's been demonstrated that literally anyone can become president, that all they have to do is connect with the base, and that's it. It doesn't matter if they've broken the law. It doesn't matter if they've been disgusting. It doesn't matter if you trust them alone in a room with your daughter. It doesn't matter if they are going to lie to you. It doesn't matter if they've failed in everything they've ever done, lied in everything they've ever done. It doesn't matter how many criminal or civil or federal indictments are pending on their name or the names of their children. It doesn't matter at all. All that matters is the freak show. All that matters is... So what I'm trying to say is I don't think America is ever going to have, again, a U.S. president who is not a celebrity. America is never going to, again, have a president of the United States who is in any sense of the word qualified for the job. So I think that's part of why I'm looking back at all of these previous eras with more interest, more avid interest. And one of those, of course, is President Reagan, who when he was running for president in earnest, I had to, as much as I thought that a lot of his domestic policies and financial policies especially were appalling, I had to defend him to people who said, who wants an actor in the White House? I had to say, well, okay, you're 35 now. How'd you like it if I called you a baby? You wouldn't. You wouldn't like it if I called you a baby. You'd ask me, why are you calling me a baby when I'm not? I'd say, well, you were 20 years ago. So why shouldn't I call you that? And, and why should I I'm looking for a stringer. Why do I need a stringer who's a baby? I feel the same way when you say I don't want an actor in the White House, because you're forgetting that this particular actor ran the 5th largest economy in the world. He was governor of California. That's not a beginner's job. That's not something that a baby can do. But so anyway, it was one of the very limited grounds on which I found myself defending Ronald Reagan when he was president. But at least that counts as experience. Definitely counts as experience. But anyway, this is an oral history of the Reagan presidency. And this is an updated version. I remember when the original version of this came out, and this is just, time has passed. They got to talk. The two editors, Deborah and Gerald Strober, just went talking to everybody and broke it down the way the best oral histories always are, which is by subject. So you get a section on domestic affairs, a section on Star Wars, a section on the Soviet Union, a section on foreign affairs just in general, and you just talk to everybody about that subject and then collate them all. And oral histories like this that are from a big publisher, they've got eyes on them. Everybody, by the end of the Reagan administration, every single person, even remotely connected with the Reagan White House, had 6 different lawyers. so it's not like these people weren't carefully vetting what they were saying for this oral history. But so you have to keep that in mind. But one of the benefits of an oral history like this, even knowing that about the people who are participating in it, is that they can't see the future. They are being extra wary and extra cautious about all the stuff they know to be wary and cautious about, but they don't know what value they will have to history. No idea at all. So oral histories end up being invaluable, although usually as a window into value. If you are, for instance, if you are crazy enough to be embarking on the researching and writing of a presidential biography, you will know that oral histories are mainly windows. You can read them, sure, but what you really want is the raw materials, the tape recordings, the unedited transcripts, that sort of thing. And a lot of times those things are available. So oral histories have their worth, definitely. This next one is another old one. You'll notice that these books are all over the map in terms of age. I had no idea what I was encountering from one guest room to the next. But this is J. Frank Dobie. This is the voice of the Coyote, which is he was a hoot. He was a storyteller, a raconteur, and this has original illustrations all throughout. And it's just, I won't even call it a natural history of the American coyote, Canis latrans. Well, I firmly believe that I am the only booktuber who has ever fondled the belly of a wild coyote. And they're adorable. They're wonderful people. And this, I wouldn't even call it a natural history in the strict sense of the term. This is more like an extremely compendious collection of Western folklore and also Western natural history observations, but no field work, except being out in the field with a gun and a dog. Nothing like that. So it's a weird combination of two kinds of nature writing that I really like. So on this next one, another find, another one of the things that has to be in my collection, and a book we've seen before, only not in this form. This is Ben Pimlott, his book, The Queen. His biography of Queen Elizabeth II, which, you know, you look at it and it looks all stately and it's got a picture of her in her budding youth, and you think, well, okay, it's just another Queen Elizabeth biography. But if, as I think I mentioned when I held up the trade paperback that I recently found, relatively recently, as I think I mentioned when I held that paperback up, Pimlott is different from any other royal biographer. His Queen Elizabeth book is amazing. It's full of wit and sarcasm and incredible observations. This is not what you get way too often in royal biographies, which is they lapse into a kind of a somnolent pattern of dinner parties and state occasions and whatnot. And they sort of start, they might not do it right away, but they sort of end up taking things at the surface and just sort of trotting along to the end. And Pimlott doesn't do that. He's a vigorously curious author. So I was very happy to have this in a hardcover. I get rid of my trade paperback and put this on the shelf with, you know, my 10 other Queen Elizabeth II biographies. Oh God! And then there's this. This is also March Mystery Madness. I was very happy to find this. Another huge book. This is Ian Rankin. This is the Jack Harvey novels. There's 3 of them in here. Look at the size of that thing. Also a UK trade paperback. From a period in his life early on in his writing career when his rebus novels, he's become famous for his rebus novels. But at the time, he had written a few of them, but they weren't quite famous. And they weren't exactly paying the bills. And he and his wife decided to pull up stakes and move to the middle of nowhere, France, to a property that they could just barely afford that had land so that, you know, they could raise their own, have a vast vegetable garden and be more or less self-sufficient, or that was the dream anyway. And when they were there, you know, they set about renovating the house and growing the garden and getting to know the locals. And of course, Ian Rankin kept writing. And something happened while he was there. He kept working on rebus novels, but something happened to him that I have seen happen with lots of other writers. When they transplant themselves somewhere else, they will often get a burst of enthusiasm, of inspiration for writing, but almost like it was happening to a different person, slightly different. They will start writing something that's not like anything else that they write. And a lot of them want to capture that. A lot of authors over the course of, you know, the last 300 years who've experienced that have then fetishized it. So they get back to their you know, apartment in New York City, and they realize that type of writing, the type of writing that flowed so easily when I was down in Saint-Tropez or whatever, I can't do it here in the slush with the doormen and the cabbies. I can't do it here. I can only write X novel when I'm back there, and then they would make a pilgrimage to do that. Ian Rankin never did that, but the novels that he wrote, these Jack Harvey novels, he wrote there, and they don't read exactly like his rebus novels. They read. I was looking forward to rereading them because I think I've only read 2 out of the 3 in here, and it was a while ago. But if I remember correctly, they read just different enough from the rebus novels so that if you didn't know their genesis, you might think that it was a different author. Just that much of a different tone to them. So I was very happy to find this. Then we have this thing here, John Keegan's biography or history of the First World War. which I've had at various times. I don't have it now. Well, I do now. I've had the paperback. He did a big illustrated version of it. I had that as well. But I get rid of them right away because people ask me, what's a good, in fact, I get this question a lot. What's a good 1-volume accessible history of World War I that I can start on the subject with? And I recommend, there are a couple of other authors, a couple of other books that I recommend, but I also recommend this one quite a bit. So I get it and I get rid of it. So I knew as soon as I saw this that I didn't have it. And that's about First World War. And this is another thing I didn't have any version of at all at the moment. And this is about the aftermath, the immediate aftermath of World War I. This is Paris, 1919, by Margaret Macmillan, who is a great World War I historian, just fantastic. Wish I had all of her books. But this is her bestseller by a wide margin. And I've only read it once. So I was very happy to find it. This will be a treat to read again. And then there's this thing here. Those of you who've been watching this channel for an obscene length of time will know already. I have a weak spot for Vikings. I have a weak spot for books about Vikings. I think the whole subject is fascinating for every conceivable reason, not just because of the great art, the great literature that's connected with Scandinavian society, but also because the Viking phenomenon itself is so discreet. There's 1 year where they appear off the coast, and then they go everywhere, and they seem to have the run of the world, and then the phenomenon ends, and everything in between there is all in bright primary colors. The Vikings show up and make history more interesting for a little while, and then they go away. And I found a book by Magnus Magnusson called Viking with an exclamation point. I couldn't turn it down, especially since it's free. It doesn't cost anything, so I had to get it. This is just a big. It's got all these great color photos. It's just a big trot, just a big. Popular history of Vikings. I don't need it. I have a whole shelf of them, but I couldn't pass it up. There's this thing, Douglas Brinkley. This is The Wilderness Warrior, Theodore Roosevelt and the Struggle for America. And it's when I first saw a word of it and got a partial advance copy of it, I admit I didn't do it justice. I sort of skimmed it and came away with the impression that it was Brinkley's argument that Roosevelt was an ecological warrior, an ecological crusader, and of course I wasn't sanguine on that idea, since Roosevelt spent a huge part of his life killing animals that never did him any harm, and may be one of the greatest popularizing sources of this absolute nonsense that you'll still hear today, that taking a gun out into the wilderness and shooting animals dead is an act of conservation, that hunters are some of the best conservationists, which is absolute insanity if you've ever met any of the people they go out to butcher. It's as much a perversion of logic as saying that concentration camp guards were some of the foremost guardians of Jewish health. They had a motivation. This is what I'm saying. But that's not conservation. They had a motivation that had nothing to do with... Anyway, the point I was trying to make in that digression is that I subsequently realized that Brinkley had put a huge amount more work into this book than just that. That it is effectively a biography. Because if you go at the subject of Theodore Roosevelt as a biographer from the standpoint of his relationship with the natural world, well, he hardly ever strayed from it. You could write a biography of him that way that would be a soup to nuts biography. It's the same thing as if you were to talk about his best friend and successor, William Howard Taft. If you did a Taft biography and went at it through a lens of the law, Taft's relationship with the law, you could write virtually the whole thing. You would never need to leave that lens. And so I was happy to see this, and I'm going to treat it more as just an actual biography and read it again that way, and more generously. And then talking about biographies, here's another one. It's great, and this is another placeholder like the Barbara Pym, because I know I want this in hardcover, and I know that I'll see it in hardcover at the Brattle or Goodwill's or whatever. But I don't have it at the moment, and I wanted it. This is Stanley Olson's biography of John Singer Sargent, who is one of my two favorite modern artists. There's Sargent and there's St. Gaudens, and I love them both, and they loved each other. Professionally, of course. And I've had this, I've read it. It's a great, great biography. Not only authoritative, but really witty and acid. And I love that. I love it when a biographer remembers that that's part of the job. So when I saw it for free, I had to grab it. And then, believe it or not, we've got to the end of this enormous. Now picture, I can't do a pyramid of these things, obviously. There's too many of them. But picture carrying these around in tote bags. One of my tote bags actually broke just before I got back here. And picture carrying these things in tote bags and shoulder bags. Picture all that weight. Carrying all that weight once your teenager had deserted you. Picture that, carrying all of this. And then add about 50 years to your current age. And then you can imagine. But anyway, this is the last book. Another World War. This is also a thing that plugs a hole in my collection, something that I would have got anyway, even if it weren't, free and being thrown away. It's a World War II history. It's Ridgway's Paratroopers by Clay Blair. It's a history of paratroopers, not just Ridgway's, but it's a history of paratroopers in World War II, Allied paratroopers, and it's terrific, just terrific. It's very heavy on facts and figures, so you really have to want a serious history. That's what you have to be in the mood for. It's a very different thing from, for instance, the John Keegan, which isn't heavy on the facts and figures. This is written by a professional historian for people who are seriously interested in the subject. And yet, Blair is a fantastic storyteller. So it doesn't get bogged down, ever. And is terrific. It's a terrific account, probably the best one that'll ever be written, of a particular kind of fighter during the war that almost never makes it into the larger books. I'd be willing... I mean, John Keegan wrote a one-volume book about the Second World War. I bet he mentions paratroopers maybe twice in the whole thing. Well, here's a 600-page book about them. So there you go. This happened just because I walked out my front door. so I'm gonna have a huge amount of fun. I'm not gonna be able to do it in the next 6 hours, but after that, I'm gonna have a huge amount of fun just roaming through these things, and I will honor the exertion of getting them back here and also the fun of having a haul this huge. I will honor that by picking one or two of them to actually reread right away before I sort them, for someday. So anyway, I'm going to wrap that up for now, and I will see you soon. Thank you, BookTube. Thanks for sitting with me. It's so much fun to have people to talk about these things with. But I'll be back. Thank you.